All right, let's try and get the latest now on the situation in Kenya. For this conversation, we're joined by a lawyer who is practicing in Kenya, George Kegoro. We're also joined by an activist and a Kenyan student in South Africa, though, Josiah Muriuki, who is with me in studio here. There you see him wondering where he is. We are here. We are here. Thank you very much, Josiah. Now, I want to start with George, who is in Nairobi right now. Mr. Kegoro, good evening to you, and thank you for your time. Are you able to paint a picture of what it's like in Kenya today, particularly the capital, Nairobi? Are these protests still located within the capital, or are they starting to spread outside? For example, today, I saw on television that some protests were also happening in Mombasa.
So, thank you very much for having me. The protests have taken except on the first day of the protests, which was Tuesday last week, when the protests took place only in Nairobi. The following day, Wednesday, they spread across the country, and every day they have happened in every part of the country. There are parts of the country that had not joined, that have kept joining the protests as the days go by. So they have taken place on the subsequent days, and not only in Nairobi, and not only in Mombasa, but in every part of the country. I saw today that Pokot joined in the protests. There was another protest in Eldoret. There was one in Kisumu. And then what is also happening in Nairobi is, in addition to those that take place in the city center, which were very big on Tuesday, 2 days ago, we are also having protests in neighborhoods. There was a big protest in Ongatarongai, and the information we have is that the protesters kind of overran the security forces, and there were skirmishes there. 2 nights ago, there were protests in a neighborhood called Githurai, which is on the outskirts of Nairobi. Today again, there were protests in Kangemi, which is on the outskirts of Nairobi. So the point is, within Nairobi, they are not confined in the city center only, as happened on the first day. They're also taking place in neighborhoods, and they're also happening in other places around the country.
All right. If I could just stay with you for a moment, George. Why are these protests continuing? Because the president has withdrawn this contentious bill, and are they still large protests? In other words, are there still many people that are involved in this, or is it dying down, the intensity of the protests?
The protests remain intense, and I think the demands by the protesters have evolved. They started with a demand that Parliament should not enact the bill. Parliament enacted the bill anyway. It shifted to a pressure on the president not to sign it. He has rejected it, abandoned it, and sent it back to Parliament. But that is now not and he has offered in his speech last evening to engage with all stakeholders to review the bill. But that now is not the demand. I think the new demand is personified by a message on social media where the protesters are saying that you can't kill us and lead us. So I think this is a reaction to what happened on Tuesday, where dozens of people were killed in the city center in Nairobi that were protesting there. And there were also killings, we understand, in the neighborhood of Githurai. So the fact of police violence on the protesters is now also a new and independent basis of the protest. But secondly, it seems to me that, and I've said this in the past, that the finance bill was only the trigger for the protests, whose real reason was a view by the citizens that the government is living large, public officials are living large on taxpayers' money, and are preaching to the population to exercise austerity and imposing on them punitive tax measures so that they can continue living large. And it seemed the president seemed to recognize that fact when he made his speech yesterday, promising that he's going to scale down the size of the presidency and is going to take measures that signify austerity on the part of the government. So the fact of corruption, and again he spoke about it, and when you see public officials wearing extremely expensive watches, wearing expensive suits and shoes, and they display them to the public, and the belts, designer things, people who are known to have been poor in the last few days, I mean, just last few months before they got into office, and they live ostentatiously. Everybody concludes that they can't manage or afford to buy those expensive and reasonably priced items with private money or with money that has been earned genuinely. So the president has also spoken to the problem of corruption and promised that in the consultations that he's going to institute, corruption is going to become an important part of what he's going to pursue. So the real drivers, in summary, are grievances against runaway corruption that is supporting ostentatious lifestyles by public officials who are increasingly arrogant against the public, and then the killings that have taken place in the context of the protests.
All right. Let's bring it back to studio then. Josiah Muriuki is a student, a Kenyan student, but studying in South Africa.
Yes.
Good evening to you and welcome. Are you in solidarity with what is happening in your home country?
First, thank you very much. My name is Josiah Muriuki, and I am a Kenyan, a Gen Z Kenyan, and I am a student here in South Africa.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I am in solidarity with my fellow Kenyans and my fellow Gen Zs who are protesting for the sake of our country.
Why? Why do you support the protests?
Okay, so this is the reason as to why I support the protests. I will first start with the reasons as to why the protests have been going on since last week, and I have been in full support of the protests since last week because it started on social media, and I remember it was highly mocked. People were saying, especially high government officials, were saying the cool kids are going to the streets. You know, they said these guys only know how to go use Uber. They go to KFC. They go to. They just gave examples of things that our generation is doing in a way of mocking that these people are not able to conduct a protest.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, we had plans to just hold peaceful protests in the streets, and that is what happened. But then it started to get worse because what we started seeing is the government shooting live bullets on peaceful protesters, and there was tear gassing of people who are saying we are peaceful. They only went with water bottles. They had handkerchiefs, their phones, some of them lip gloss, just things, basic things. and none of them was doing anything like throwing stones, because in Kenya in the past we have seen that happening a lot.
Yeah.
And the big thing was reject the finance bill, because we have seen how much our people, I am in South Africa, but I support my family. I do a lot of things in Kenya financially. And so if the economy of Kenya is bad, and mark you, I am a student, so if the economy of Kenya is bad, I'm not able to even support in anything, because my support will be like a drop in the ocean. And the reason as to why I stand so much in solidarity right now is because I have seen massacre. And you know, right now, there is a lot of connections on social media, which means you can connect on any of the platforms, and videos, including videos of live shooting, and people who have bullets all over their body have been circulating. And these are, even the officers, some of them have been saying these are orders from above. So if it's orders from above, then it means that the president is aware of who is shooting and why the shootings are going on. And there is a day, 2 days ago, the president stood in the evening and said that this is a criminal, a treasonous and criminal occurrence. And so if it's a criminal thing, then you are calling the Gen Zs criminals. And we are not criminals. We came peacefully to ask for justice. And then you shot few of us and then continued shooting. And then we are dying at the expense of an economy and a generation, because these are the young people. They're the people who have the future with them.
All right, let's take a break. When we return, we're going to ask the question, is it reasonable then, after all of what has been painted here, to ask for President Ruto to step down? Because these are the demands now. We continue shortly after this. You're watching News at Prime, and if you're just joining us, we are wrapping up a discussion on the situation in Kenya. A number of people have been killed in that country, 23 in total, as a result of the protests over the finance bill that has since been withdrawn by the president of that country. Still with me for this conversation is a lawyer practicing in the capital, Nairobi, George Kegoro. We're also joined by an activist who's a Kenyan he's a Kenyan binational. He's actually a Kenyan student, but studying in South Africa. I'm getting things mixed up in my head now. And his name is Josiah Muriuki. All right, let's come back to you, George. And the demands now are that the president of Kenya must resign with immediate effect. Is that a reasonable demand, you think?
The Constitution of Kenya says that the people are sovereign. That means they are the ones who determine what happens in the country. If they are able to unite, and we've seen extraordinary unity across the country that transcends parochial identities, whether they are based on ethnicity, whether they are based on religion, whether they're based on class. You've seen us extraordinary solidarity on the part of the people who are making demands initially that the bill be dropped, and their demand was legitimized by the bill being dropped. If their next demand is that that is not enough and that the president should now resign, you can't say that the demands of the people are not reasonable. You can try and maybe bring about a situation where there is negotiation on what alternatives exist, because of course, the resignation by the president in Kenya is unprecedented. It is also a big political act. And so the question would have to be, what alternatives are possible that are intermediate, that the population or the people who are protesting can make on the president, on the government.
Yeah.
So the people are always right, because it's their government. Whatever they demand, it is deemed to be right. So the only thing that would have to be ascertained is whether the demands being made by the protesters represent a majority of the citizens.
Josiah?
Yes.
Coming back to you,
Yes.
the president of Kenya has only been in power for, I think, 2 years now.
Yes.
How would you describe his leadership? And do you think that these demands that he resigns over this particular issue, are they reasonable?
Okay, thank you for that question. I want to answer your question, the one you asked about his leadership. 7 million people, 7.1 million people voted for the president, and I was one of those people. And the reason as to why we voted, because now I'll speak for the voters, the reason as to why we voted for the president is because he promised a country and a great leader.
Yeah.
But right now it has come to be that, you know, he is not doing that. And what we would see in the past few months, because it has been travel, which has been very expensive. We have seen corruption happening where politicians close to him, allied to him, are doing a lot of show off with public resources, because we know how much an MP earns in Kenya. But we can see what they are giving, even carrying money with polythene bags.
But he campaigned, President Ruto campaigned on the ticket of anti-corruption. How is it possible that he would have allowed for people serving in his administration to continue with corruption as if with impunity?
We had him yesterday acknowledge that corruption is happening. We had him yesterday in his speech yesterday where he dropped the bill of which has been deemed to be unconstitutional by the legal teams. We had him talk about things that are happening, and he said that corruption is one of the things that needs to be addressed. So it means that it's something that is real. We are not imagining things, and we are seeing a lot of unconstitutional things happening, one of them being police disrupting people who are protesting peacefully. And that means that we elected someone, the person we elected is not the person we have right now. So I don't know, it might be advisors, it might be him who changed, because, you know, we change with situation. But then we don't know what changed him, and that is why now the thing has changed from you should reject the bill to you should now resign. Why? Because the people are tired. And I'm telling you this on behalf of the generation, because if you even ask someone like George, people of an older generation have not been doing the protests because they have been very politicized. They have been led by politicians. Right now, protests were not political. Protests were partyless. They were not religious. They were not led by anyone who is in the political class. They were the people, the youth of Kenya, who are frustrated and tired, who went to the streets to say, Mr. President, you're not doing the right thing, please reject the bill. When he didn't reject, he killed people. Okay, his people killed people, his government killed people. And then now people are saying, if your government is killing people, then it means you are the leader of the government. Then what should you do? You should resign. That's what the people are saying. And according to the Kenyan constitution, the people have the sovereign power.
Gentlemen, we are completely out of time, but I want to thank you very much for your participation.